Welcome to the FarrCast. I'm your producer, Harry Jennings, and we are kicking off Season 9 this week with Jim Lebenthal on markets, Dan Mahaffee on DC, and special guest Lester Munson. Jim tells us he's not afraid of stagflation, Dan warns of the danger of breaking down societal norms, and Les shares some inside baseball from discussions he had this week with a U.S. Senator. And now, it's time for the FarrCast, and your host, Michael Farr.
Welcome to the FarrCast. I am Michael Farr. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to say again this week, but I wish we had a drum roll, Harry. Can you get a drum roll? The first episode of Season 9 on the FarrCast. Season 9 on the FarrCast, where we're with you each and every week, except we weren't for the last two. But given these couple of exceptions, we're here most each and every week. This week, we're going to start with Lebenthal, Mahaffee, and then we're going to go to Les Munson. Lots internationally to talk about. We begin this morning, ladies and gentlemen, with a bit of tragedy, the assassination of this young man, Charlie Kirk. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't care what your political views are. I do care about the Constitution. I do care very deeply about our right to speak freely and express our opinions. And this is a tragedy, and ladies and gentlemen, we're better than this. So please say a prayer for this young man, for his family, and for our country. All are in desperate need of those prayers this morning. Also, as we are taping this morning, to use that old antiquated phrase, I'm not sure what you call it, I guess recording this morning. It is September 11th. Amazing that this young man who was killed was somewhere around 7 years old, I think, on September 11th. He would have been in the second grade, so we would talk about a life cut short. Americans who suffered. And I heard this morning that 40% of the victims of 9/11 in the collapse of those towers have yet to be identified. They're still sorting through their DNA, if you can imagine the horrible destruction then. We, as a country, have continued to move on, and we've continued to be America. As we go through different versions of America, we continue to be America, and we continue to be Ronald Reagan's shining city upon a hill. And sometimes we need to remind ourselves who we are and who we strive to be. I trust the hearts and souls and minds of every American to be quiet, to listen, to hear that voice, and then let's all walk together to that better place. This is the only country in the world that can happen. So let's get this back together here, folks. We can do it. Stock market continues to make new highs, all-time highs. The rule is buy low. Don't be complacent, folks. Please pay attention to these valuations. Interest rates are going to come down, I believe, here in the next couple of weeks. The Federal Reserve is going to lower these short-term rates. Should they? We're going to see. Yeah, I think they should for a lot of different reasons. Are they good economic reasons? I'm not so sure, and neither is the Fed. That's the big problem for the Fed. We saw a whole lot of purchasing of foreign goods in the first quarter. There was a huge dearth of purchasing in the second quarter. They were getting ahead of tariffs, and they filled the warehouses. Well, the warehouses are running out. New things are being purchased. Tariffs have not shown up really yet in any of the data. Inflationary fears of the Fed have yet to materialize, and the Fed is saying, but that doesn't mean they won't. So they want to wait and see. And the other side of the argument suggests they're waiting too long. They're being too cautious. The economy's slowing too quickly. I don't know that it's slowing too quickly, but I know that if I were Fed chairman, I would want to be patient, buy myself some time. So I expect a 1/4 point cut coming up. And then the most important, probably Fed statement we've had in over a year is going to be what happens in that statement, what happens in Jay Powell's press conference afterwards. Everybody on Wall Street is going to be on the edge of their seats to hear how many more cuts, how many, and how big, And how low do you go? You can just hear the Limbo song playing in the background, and that's all Wall Street wants to hear. They don't want to hear why. Wall Street doesn't care why. They just want the lower rates, and they want them now, and they want them for a long time, because that's when stock prices go up. Damn the long-term implications. Just get my stock prices up. So we'll see what happens. Powell's in a difficult position, and then, of course, we have to see how the Fed evolves with the new Fed chairman coming in probably in May or June next year. Now, finally, we have Congress with a very full schedule that they don't seem to want to talk about, including budget, including funding, whether we have a government shutdown. That's all coming up and nobody wants to talk about. We've got Vladimir Putin, who is sending drones into Poland, and President Trump saying, here we go. And Michael Farr and people my age are thinking, here we go again. Here we go again. Are we going to get into an arms race here with Russia again? What's going to happen? Will the president actually put up? Will he actually put up and send our weaponry and defense systems over there in fuller force? Will this be salvation for Ukraine? We're going to ask Mahaffee. We're going to ask Les Munson. And then finally, we're paying attention to what's going on with China. We're paying attention, a lot of attention, what's going on in the Middle East with Bibi Netanyahu. And by the way, China, pay attention, folks. Donald Trump, rumors are in Washington, is getting ready to make a significant China policy statement in the next couple of days, and Wall Street is going to care about hearing what we hear he's going to say. And I really can't tell you any more than that, folks, because I've been asked not to. But there are advantages when you're on the ground in certain places. Pay attention to what the president does with China. It's going to be a rather large statement coming up. Wall Street's, it's too expensive. You're going to sell stocks. You're going to buy stocks. Where are the opportunities? 24 and a half times earnings isn't cheap, and complacency is your enemy and foe out there. Jim Lebenthal, Cerity Partners, CNBC contributor, my very dear friend. Welcome back to the FarrCast, and what a great way to begin season 9.
Yes, it's so great to be here. Michael, I really do have to compliment you on your introduction. And thank you. Thank you for it. I'm grateful to you for it. What happened yesterday was horrifying. To me personally, it made me call a family meeting and discuss the state of the world. No matter what your politics are, what happened yesterday to Mr. Kirk is just simply unacceptable. Obviously, you have me here today to discuss finances and the markets, and we should get into that, but thank you.
Well, and a Navy veteran and a great patriot that you are, couldn't pick a better person. We usually agree on our country. We don't always agree on our stocks and economy and valuations. 24 and a half times earnings. Are folks whistling past the graveyard? Am I wrong to be concerned about the Fed's patience?
You're going exactly where I wanted to start. I'm going to change the number a little bit. If you look at 2026 earnings estimates for the S&P 500, we're at 22 times. And look, that's not cheap.
Hang on. That doesn't mean what I said was wrong, ladies and gentlemen. I'm looking. He's talking about next year's estimates are that 22 times. Okay. My numbers are still correct, right, Jim? I mean, my current estimate. Okay, fine.
Yes, you are correct, but 20.
All right. Hey, you know what? They're gonna, they're sitting here going, Farr doesn't know what the PE multiple of the S&P is. Yes, Farr knows what the stupid multiple of the S&P is. Jim's talking about future, which means it calculates and it accounts for the earnings growth, projected earnings growth, and analyst estimates, which I also feel are a bit too high. But go ahead, Jim.
Harry, you're going to have some editing to do, but okay. Look, it's an expensive market, but that doesn't mean that you go out and you sell it and you raise cash. That can be very dangerous. There's a number of things that can, and in fact, probably will go right in the near term. The Fed should be cutting rates next week. I mean, I say that not in some moral point of view, but just my look at the data, the softening of the labor market and the limited effect of tariff pass-through to prices so far tells me that they should lower rates. We'll see. There's still a week to go, and maybe inflation numbers will come in hotter than expected, but they should lower rates. Deregulation is coming. Profits are growing. Companies have been hanging on to workers. They haven't been firing them. They certainly haven't been hiring them either, and we see that in continuing claims. But if you get trade policy having more certainty. There's still a lot of runway on that, right? We've got these legal challenges before the Supreme Court to the legality of tariffs. We've still, as you've mentioned, we've got China looming out there in terms of what deal is going to be struck there. So there's room for uncertainty to come down. If all of these things come to pass, I think you could see a position where companies are looking at growing profits, and profits are going to grow about 10% this year over last. Versus this is looking at S&P 500 estimates, and projected to grow another 14% next year. Companies want to hire in that situation. When profits are growing, they want to expand. They just need to know what the rules of the road are. So, as that clarity comes, I think we could get out of this slow patch in the economy, and the market, which looks maybe a little expensive, regardless of whose number you use, might not be as expensive.
Do you fear stagflation anywhere in here? That's a fear. We're hearing a lot of folks talk about it.
We've been hearing folks talk about it for quite some time, you and I. And no, I don't fear it. There's the direct answer. I mean, I have yet to see the stag or the inflation. I know, I'm quoting Jay Powell. If somebody wants to dispute that, okay, here's the numbers. The US GDP last quarter and so far projected this quarter is growing at 3% plus. That's not stag. That's growth. That's above trend growth.
Correct.
Unemployment, despite weak patches, at 4.3%. I mean, anybody with any sense of history will tell you that that's low. Inflation, look, I'd like inflation to come down, but when you look at the CPI on the headline basis, you're looking at numbers that have a two handle. Yeah, I want it to come down to 2%, but you're looking at, 2.7, 2.8%. Those are not what I grew up with when stagflation was really stagflation. And you were talking double digit CPI increases. I just don't see the stag or the inflation.
Okay. That's encouraging. That really is. That's very encouraging. And how long do you think you would wait? Now, this is a different question, Jim. Not how long do you think Jay Powell should wait, but were you chairman of the Fed, with the pressures you're getting from everywhere and trying not to really mess this up, how much more data would you need to see to continue cutting? How long do you want to wait?
Yeah, we're a week in advance of the Fed announcement, and I think the data is there sufficiently to say that inflation, while it's not at the target that they want, is low enough. Combine that with a labor market that is showing signs of softening, and probably the most important thing from Chairman Powell, and I know you're asking me what I would do, but this is data from Chairman Powell, is for many, many months, he and the rest of the Fed members have been saying that interest rate policy right now is restrictive. It's restrictive. There is room to cut by 25 basis points next week, and that's what I think he should do based on the data. Oh, by the way, like that pressure, if he and the rest of the committee decides not to cut by 25 basis points next week, that pressure is going to become unsustainable. And I worry that our president, who is predisposed to do unorthodox things with regards to the Fed, is going to go off the edge.
I'm just charmed that you stopped and qualified that the president is restrained with regards to the Fed. The unorthodox things might check off a few more categories and boxes from our president, but it's not without effect, ladies and gentlemen. The president is not without effect. Okay, I think yes, there's no question. Politically and economically, there is plenty of cover to cut by 25 basis points. 25 basis points doesn't change anything material in the economy this size.
Exactly.
So why the hell not do it? Why the hell not do it? And then my question is, and the thing I'm focused on, and there's no answer for this, I don't think, is how long do you wait to do it again? How much time does that buy you? Can you wait till December? Can you hold out against the hue and cry? Or do you need to cut again? Well, I mean, this is the balancing act that she's going to play. Jim?
Well, as you think about the hue and cry, I think you may have uttered that in the context of the political environment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and understandably so. But I might actually put that hue and cry into a different context, which is to say, where does 25 basis points actually matter? It doesn't matter for corporate America making 10-year budgeting decisions and capital expenditure decisions. It does matter for the lower income demographics. It does. these are the folks who have struggled the most with high inflation. These are the folks who rely on credit cards, who rely on auto loans and such. And honestly, 25 basis points and maybe another one or two this year, that will affect them in a positive way. And those folks need relief.
Well, it affects me and mine in a negative way. My money market balance interests are going down. My interest I'm earning is going down, and so when the world
Your
is all
money,
about
your money market balance, Michael, I thought your middle name was YOLO. You only live once. You have cash. I thought you were 100% in the equity market, which is going to rally.
if anybody ever knew how actually conservative I am, but I think you suspect what my anchor to windward looks like. There's a point, and when you get as much white hair as I have, that you just decide the risk is no longer worth it. Um, Jim Lebenthal is a partner at Cerity Partners, my great friend. You always bring us such great insights, and he's in it every day managing billions of dollars, folks. Listen to Lebenthal. We're going to be right back with Dan Mahaffee figuring out what is going on in Washington and what's going to happen. Do we get to another shutdown? When we come back in season 9 on the FarrCast. Please stay with us.
Thanks for being with us this week. Now it's time to go to our political analyst, Dan Mahaffee, and your host, Michael Farr.
Welcome back to the FarrCast. I'm Michael Farr. Joining me and now again this week, as he has for 9 years, now in season 9. I suppose it's 8 years now that we're in season 9, but why quibble? Dan Mahaffee, the chairman of the Dr. Scholl. No, I guess you're the president of the Dr. Scholl Foundation. Chairman's coming. Watch out, Madam Chairman. And president of the Dr. Scholl Foundation, a scholar at the think tank of Washington, D.C., for the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress, the senior political analyst on the FarrCast in season 9. Mahaffee, welcome back.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning. Yeah, it's been quite a stretch when you think about it. 8 years. Wow. And to think we wondered what we would talk about.
What we would talk about every week if we had 12 minutes just to devote to politics. And we really did, folks. We were like, do we have enough for 12 minutes every week on politics? We have jammed most weeks 30 or 40 minutes into those 12 minutes, and we'll probably do it again this week, Dan. We began with this horrible assassination this morning, this 31-year-old man. Regardless of your political views, we are better than that in America, Dan, and I know you and I agree. But this, is a really, I think, very dark day for America when we see this sort of thing. The anniversary of 9/11 and what our country has endured these past 25 years is remarkable, and I think it shows the resilience of America and the American people, the American system of democracy, of capitalism, of free markets. All of these things continue to work in spite of criticism, because of criticism, and that we have open criticism and can say what we need to say, and that we can disagree and try to find some common ground. I hope that we still hold as a goal the finding of common ground.
No, you're right, Michael, because one, in America, no young man should not go home, and no woman should be widowed and children orphaned simply because of a political disagreement in this country. It's not how it works. Two, if we do fall into a system where all that matters is who has the bigger gun, when you lose the rule of law, when you lose that open debate, those things of capitalism, of free expression, they no longer matter when it breaks down to violence. And you see one around the world, the history of places like Northern Ireland, the Middle East, which we discuss regularly, where these political disagreements and violence become generational. It takes centuries, if
Yes.
ever, to resolve them.
Yes.
And then ultimately, too, that on this day, the anniversary of 9/11, we don't need to make enemies of our fellow Americans when we should remember how many enemies there are abroad ready to do us harm.
I think that is so well said. And I think probably most of our listeners know um, I'm nobody's wimp. I'm really not. But I've always found the term senseless violence to be redundant. I truly have. It's all senseless. There is violence. There is no need for violence, and we're better than violence and should be around the world. And that, Dan, includes what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. See, in the media, we call that a segue, folks. You hear how I did that? Uh, okay. Uh, Putin has apparently crossed a line with President Trump. We'll see if indeed he has. Drones have gone into Poland. They've crossed that line. They've started to, I guess, perpetrate some attacks on Polish soil, and Poland is clearly unhappy. Will the president, when he says, "Here we go," actually go?
Mhm. Yes, Michael, I think many of us and those around the world are looking at this, and those in Europe are hoping that the rhetoric does get matched with action, particularly now that Putin seems to have completely played off any of the rhetoric or cooperation that was coming out of Anchorage, whether the messages sent there landed. I think not. And I want to remind our listeners that Polish airspace has been routinely violated by Russian drones throughout the war. The question now is, as Putin really ramps this up, is NATO and the Trump administration answering? I think it's a very unresolved question because one, yes, there needs to be more equipment. There needs to be this support. We all see it. The question is where it will be built and how fast it can be built. The rhetoric is there, the support is there, but the actual force generation will still be an issue. And look, we can push against this, but the calculus, as we've talked about, is how long can you send $2 million missiles against $20,000 drones? And that's a big question for NATO. And when it comes to truly and legitimately deterring the Russians, not just with what we hope are sanctions, but let's be clear. What I'm hearing from the administration, one, you look at their rhetoric on if there are sanctions, they want the Europeans to join them. And this would include not only sanctions, but perhaps tariffs against, is it against China? Is it against India? Look, we've seen some of that because look at what we've seen China, India, and Russia do. They're tapping into that Russian energy, that gas station that Russia is, and we're seeing them further their energy ties with Russia, even though there's pressure from the Trump administration not to do so.
You have an expertise in strategy, and you have a degree in strategic studies from Georgetown University. Dan worked in Washington. At what point does the United States, when we're fighting these various wars on different fronts and supplying different folks, whether it's Middle East or various conflicts or Ukraine, when do we run out of bullets? How quickly can we manufacture arms? We're flying and refurbishing some very old airplanes that are still in use and still reasonably effective. Do we get to the point where we start to run out of ammo, figuratively, literally?
Oh, we've had points where we've come close to that, and you've seen if you look at past years where it's been not even the ability to produce new weapons, but simply to move them from stockpile to stockpile. You compound this with issues of workforce, where many of the people who knew how to build that Cold War hardware, and as you say, it's aged, it's Cold War hardware, it's first Bush and Clinton administration hardware, if it's newer in many cases. A lot of that is the people who built that are retiring, and there's not the same workforce coming in to do that. So you have that compounded with the fact of consolidation across the defense industry, other factors from, particularly in Europe's case, labor and environmental regulations that make it harder to do defense work, ESG investing that shied away from defense companies for so long. All of that left the cupboard proverbially bare, as it were, as
Yes.
we're coming into a very dangerous time. And a lot of people in private industry and government have been working on this over years. It was something that was, I think, coming into clarity during the end of my day-to-day work in Washington, but it's something I even see from a philanthropic perch as we look at what you're doing on education programs, strategic study programs, things like that.
World War II, we found ourselves ill-equipped and all of a sudden had to turn the automobile industry and other industries into basically arms manufacturers, especially for tank production, which was a very long, slow process that had to be heated up and geared up very, very quickly, which we did. We rose to that moment because we were well behind. What about now? Have we, I guess, ignored arms production despite our huge military budget? Have we fallen behind, and will we be in that moment where we really have to
Yeah.
go back and convert other resources in order to meet our country's defense needs?
Yeah, that's a good question. One, Michael, one point in American history is generally in the history of our wars, we're almost always unprepared from the get-go, and then catch up and learn and adapt along the way. Secondly, though, the challenge today, and it's a great analogy you cite, and it was impressive. Look, American industry is what won World War II for the Allies. Even the Soviet waves on the Eastern Front rode in Oldsmobile trucks. So you have to remember that was American production that won World War II. Nowadays, it's not quite the same. The equipment we have, you think of an F-35, that's a supercomputer that happens to have jet engines and wings. And when you have equipment like that, you can't just happen to retool hardware like you did. So it's a lot more complex of a challenge of one, do you retool for this hardware? Or two, do we have to wholly rethink how we produce for defense because we're falling into a situation where um, we are producing too few, too exquisite, and too expensive of platforms to actually be of use in sustained conflict.
What I hear whispered around, Dan, is yeah, I know we're kind of running low. Yes, we're firing the missiles. Yes, we've got this and that. But don't worry about the US because, shh, we've got these submarines that are everywhere with nuclear arms and warheads that people can't find. Other countries can't locate our submarines with our nuclear weapons. And therefore, no one will ever dare touch us because they have to know we're very close to their backyard with the ability to do real destruction. Is that some sort of a panacea and misplaced confidence, or am I reading it wrong entirely?
Look, those are very powerful platforms. The nuclear triad and those submarines are a huge part of it. They also do need to be modernized as well. But look, they're on watch. They're ready to deter China, Russia, others to prevent that. The World War III we imagine of the 80s and the Cold War, and one that never really went away, despite what we thought. But that's not a panacea. There's other groups, there's other evildoers out there who want to do us harm. And despite those nuclear weapons and those submarines, it was box cutters and hijacked aircraft those many years ago today that did harm.
Did you just say that the Cold War we thought went away but didn't really? Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
Aha, I've never heard anybody say that. I just, that's interesting. I will tell you that when I was in Gorbachev's Soviet Union, and I was in Gorbachev's Soviet Union, as many of you know, helping open stock markets, they seemed to go away. But it seemed, I guess, as I look back on it, that the group of ex KGB folks who were being displaced hung on despite what I certainly saw as peaceful progress for a marvelous country, because and managed to put themselves back in power and keep the Soviet standard of living in place.
Mhm.
Have I got that wrong?
No, actually, one of the greatest things that the KGB class, as it were, was one, as the ones who were allowed to have foreign contacts were naturally the ones more integrated and more urbane, more sophisticated, and ready to deal with the West. And many of them took off their KGB hat and put on a, oil company privatization. They put on those hats, reaped the benefits of the shock economic reforms for themselves. And then it's no surprise that the Russian people, as it were, would be disappointed with the results of the so-called reforms when they see that, in fact, the security class was able to enrich themselves through it.
Well, and they've managed to maintain very Western lifestyles for that upper echelon with the super yachts and everything else. Okay.
Oh, and many in the West were complicit in ensuring that London, New York, other places were very welcoming for their, frankly, the looting
Those
of the
dollars.
Russian state.
Yeah, for those dollars, no
Yeah.
question. Okay, so follow the money once again, Dan. So how does this end? Do we actually support Poland, Ukraine, NATO here? Is this a tipping point? Is this a Lusitania moment that brings the U.S.
Yeah.
into this war in a material way?
Look, I think, and here's my big caveat, if the president is not distracted by the tragic events in our domestic politics at this time and focuses, can still focus on this international crisis as well. Look, there is a good chance, I think, that the president finally sees how long he's been strung along by Putin, but also rightly calls that the Europeans have to join in the pressure on Russia and those who buy energy from it to continue this war. So
I'm
that
hearing that,
has
you
to
know,
be.
folks are criticizing, saying Putin is laughing at us. Putin is laughing at President Trump. Do you believe that? Is there that level of smugness and superiority and arrogance and condescension, or are we misreading it?
Look, I think they are trying to, and I think there's smugness over our disunity. There's pleasure in seeing the turmoil they've
Love that. What a
caused
great
in
comment, Dan.
Europe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great
I
comment. Go
think
ahead.
there's that. I think there's not the, maybe not with what they've accomplished or even in the, between Putin and Trump personally. I think as they see the breaking of transatlantic relations, the growing distrust of Americans and other Europeans in their own civic institutions, all these things that they've seeded through social media influence operations, and this is not one party or another. They've worked to tear everything apart on using their influence operations. If you look at it, you look at the reports of the Intelligence Committee and politicians of both parties have said this, that they work to deceive and tear us apart, and right now they're probably smug and very happy with their efforts.
Let's move then. And I think that's a really important point. The smugness is over our disunity. The rejoicing is over the conflicts going on in America. Our enemies, in many ways, after yesterday's shooting, are celebrating that maybe our democracy isn't working all that well, and maybe freedom of speech isn't all of that free, and maybe it's under attack, which suit their purposes very well, our enemies' purposes. Dan, let's move to the Middle East, please. And we've got to go. I can't believe it. Let's tell me. Netanyahu continues to be very aggressive, and I think that President Trump is genuinely upset about this recent attack. Didn't condone it, but didn't come out all that strongly. Is there going to be a wedge here between Netanyahu and Trump, or do you think Trump is sincere in his?
Look, I think Trump is genuinely angered by this. He has a very close relationship with the Qataris. To Netanyahu, I would say don't bomb the country giving Trump his new Air Force One. When it comes to just the interpersonal politics, I think it is a very harmful and I would think very shocking to President Trump that this happened. What continues in terms of consequences, I don't know. Look, I think the president has still continued to give Netanyahu a lot of leeway on how he wants to pursue the continued campaign in Gaza and this push into Gaza City. So I don't see it ending or putting pressure anytime soon. I think for the Israelis, though, if it's true that they did not hit any of these intended targets, one, it really upsets the balance without achieving their aims. And frankly, Michael, to wrap on a point you made earlier, when the U.S. has limited resources and limited weapons to deal with many myriad crises around the world, how many policymakers are going to have patience for allies who attack allies when we have more pressing needs?
What should the next response be to what's going on in the Middle East from the U.S.? How long does this keep going on, and how long does Netanyahu stay in office? And I need it fast, Dan. Sorry.
For me, I'd like to just see some pressure of reminding, which country is the superpower, frankly. And then we'll see how we get a deal from there. But use the leverage, use the support. Again, which country is the superpower?
It seems that the world is watching to find out which country is the superpower as well. Who's going to take the stage? Who's going to do what they said they were going to do? And it's, I think, always a test as to who's going to walk the walk. I hope always that we're consistent in that. Next week, Dan, we've got to talk about what's going on legislatively in Washington, because the to-do list is a mile long. We've got a Fed meeting next week. We've got a lot to talk about next week. I can't wait till next week. I could start it now, but we'll wait. Ladies and gentlemen, the great season 8 and now season 9, Dan Mahaffee, with us once again. Thank you, Dan. We're going to be right back with Les Munson. We're going to continue this international discussion and see what he thinks is going to, maybe he's heard something about what President Trump may be telling us about China in the next couple of days. We're hearing rumors here in Washington. Please stay with us.
Michael Farr and the FarrCast are proud to support Heroes, Inc. Heroes supports the spouses and children of law enforcement officers and firefighters who gave their lives in the line of duty to the greater Washington, D.C. community. Their singular goal is to honor the supreme sacrifice made by these individuals by caring for their families. Heroes' work begins within 24 hours of the tragic loss and continues indefinitely. We invite you to learn more about Heroes' mission at heroes.org. We hope that you will consider supporting Heroes as they endeavor to honor those who protect us. That's heroes.org. Heroes, here for you, here for good. And now, back to the FarrCast and your host, Michael Farr. Welcome back to the FarrCast, and now here's your host, Michael Farr.
Welcome back to the FarrCast. I am Michael Farr. We're so glad you're with us again here this week at the beginning of season 9, ladies and gentlemen, season 9. Woof! I can't really imagine, but here we go. I did look at a picture before I started today's show. It's that little picture of yourself that comes up on these internet calls, and it's probably from 10 years ago. I didn't look all that bad, but it looks like it's been a rough 10 years for me. Anyway, it hadn't been a rough 10 years for my friend Les Munson. Joining us again, a FarrCast fan favorite, head of the international group at BGR, and it's a Washington, D.C. lobbying consulting firm. In Washington, D.C., he's one of those guys you got to know if you want to really get your way around, and if you have an issue that has to work through its way through our government, Les Munson. You just call him, and he gets it done. Les, welcome back.
Thanks, Michael. Great to be with you as always.
We're really glad you were here. Les, awful news in the headlines. Awful news in the headlines about Charlie Kirk. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said in my opening, I do not care about a person's political agenda. I care that there was a young man who was killed for voicing his opinion, and that does not happen in this country. And it should be intolerable to every American who believes and has faith in the United States Constitution, not to mention any of the Ten Commandments. Okay? So there's no way to say any of this is right. There's no way to say that shooting a CEO of a healthcare company on the streets of New York is okay. I don't give a damn. It's not. It's awful. It's wrong, and it's tragic. So, Les, can we start there? Where are we in American politics? And I heard that there was shouting among Congress people. This is your fault. This is your fault. How have we gotten to this point? And is it going to continue to devolve?
Yeah, it seems pretty bad, Michael. I mean, I think we all know this, or we all sense it if you're following the news, that things just seem way more acute, that politicians almost avoid getting along with the other party on purpose because it'll hurt them with their voters. People say things that are more extreme than they should be. And of course, the political violence that we see is just horrible. And we all, we need to do better. We all need to do better. And it's hard at a time like this for some folks who get, kind of emotionally connected to the issues at hand. But we got to look at our better angels and take the high road. And
I'm happy to look at our better angels. Show me three or four, will you? I mean, I know how cynical that sounds, but truly, I mean, I'm looking for those examples. I'm looking for those scions of that city on a hill, and I see, of course, the good people out there, but boy, you feel kind of dark on mornings like this. You're looking for the hope. You're looking for somebody to say, "Hey, folks, we're better than this, and here's why." And I'm waiting for the here's why.
Well, Michael, the new Pope is from Chicago, my hometown.
Yes.
He's a White Sox fan. I'm a Cubs fan. We couldn't disagree more on baseball issues, but he seems like a pretty impressive guy to me. If you can have a White Sox fan as the Pope, I think there's hope for us all. Anything is possible. I remain optimistic about America, about people. Yes, we have a fallen nature, but we always seem to, in time, address the issues we need to address. Doesn't mean it's pretty. Doesn't mean there's not going to be more rough road ahead of us. There probably is going to be, but I think we have to be optimistic. This is the greatest country in the world. I didn't know Charlie Kirk. I didn't follow him super well, but I've seen a lot of his remarks in the last few hours, and his message of talk to people who disagree with you, believe in your country, see the best in the other side, is something we should all be doing right now. And so maybe we can take this tragedy of what happened to him and turn it into something good, where we infuse ourselves in the idea that, that person I disagree with in reality is just like me. We're all God's children. We all have way more in common than we have different, and we can get through this.
Amen. And I have said for years, and Harry joins me in saying, that you never bet against America. You just never, ever, ever bet against this country, and you never lose faith in this country. That there is a fallen nature after you got through your Pope comments, though, tied it all very neatly together. Sends everybody back to the Pope, doesn't it, if we have a fallen nature of man? All right. We have this very difficult time in politics, and we have. I want to move internationally in a second, and I know that's more your bailiwick, but let's go to Washington on our way overseas and ask. Congress has an agenda, as long as you're armed, that nobody really wants to talk about. Seemingly, all the things they've got to do. No, budgets and things like that. Talk about some of that, will you? And how are they possibly going to get done what they need to get done, given this level of discord?
Right. By the way, Michael, it's also the anniversary, of course, of as we're talking
Yes.
today, of September 11th, and another reason for us all to come together. And so, which also makes the point that we've got less than 3 weeks for Congress to pass some sort of budget for the next fiscal year. That's likely to be a continuing resolution that keeps the government open for somewhere between 2.5 and 4 months, depending on who you listen to. I don't think they've figured it out yet. They're going to have to pass that through both the House and the Senate and get the president to sign it. There's a lot of arm wrestling over what kind of riders might be in there. There's some other issues of government spending and whether the president can decide not to spend some money that Congress told him to spend. There's some interesting constitutional legal issues that may play out at the same time all of this is happening. And then you've got the other big legislative muscle movement, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, which is a bill, mostly defense issues, but also some foreign policy issues that passes every single year. It's been like 65 or something years, 61, I think 61 years. This has happened every single year. This is the big legislative vehicle now for a lot of the things that are international in nature. Congress is the House and the Senate are both moving on that right now. So you're right. There's a lot going on while we're dealing with these cultural issues as well.
Yeah. And the odds that Congress gets bogged down, the odds that we end up with another shutdown, and the odds, I suppose, too, that Mike Johnson survives as Speaker when all of this starts to bog down.
I think Johnson's in good shape. I'll take that one first. He's very smartly tied himself to the president politically. They work in tandem. It's a good, you may disagree with their politics, but just pragmatically speaking, it's a very sensible way for him to remain in control of a very divided House of Representatives. The Republicans now have 219 votes. That's one more than you need to have a majority. It's an amazingly narrow majority, and Johnson needs that to survive. On some of these other issues, we're gonna see division. There is some bipartisanship happening behind the scenes. Again, no one wants to talk about that. No one wants to say, "Oh, I'm working across the aisle with Democrats," or "I'm working across the aisle with Republicans." Their bases don't want to hear that. But there are some things happening. This National Defense Authorization Act is a bipartisan exercise at the end of the day. So yes, the headlines are bad. Sometimes when you get down to the fourth or fifth paragraph of the story about what Congress is doing, you'll see, oh, they actually are getting along on some things. Is the government going to shut down? We had a senator in our office last night. We were hosting him for a reception, and he said, "We're not going to shut down the government." Well, at least not for very long. So I think that's a pretty good answer. I'm just going to go with that.
I studied English literature, and I was a high school English teacher. I taught 11th and 12th grade English. And in the Arthurian legend is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and oh God, Harriet, I'm missing it. Was it Lancelot? It wasn't Lancelot. Might have been. In achieving the Holy Grail, and all of them who achieved the Holy Grail were virgins, as was Sir Gawain or Sir Lancelot, except for once. It was a line from Mallory's works in the Arthurian legend, and he too was a virgin except for once.
Lord, help me to live a godly life, just not right now.
Just not right now, except for once. We'll shut down, but well, if we do, it won't be for too long. Famous last words. Okay, and that's the way Washington works. But interesting too that you are telling us that folks feel criticized for trying to do something bipartisan and actually don't want to get caught having the conversations.
Right.
I can see Harry looking at his computer trying to find me the reference. God bless you, Harry. All right. We have drones going into Poland. President Trump is reportedly furious and going to send arms. Is this the beginning of an accelerated arms race with Russia? Here we go again. And all he said was, "Here we go." And I was thinking, here we go again. I've been here and done this before with these people. What do you think, Les?
Yeah, I don't know the actual answer, Michael. I can guess that he's thinking about massive sanctions on Russia. One of the things President Trump did in the last month or so was impose these extra tariffs on India for buying Russian gas. He could, in theory, do the same with China. That would be a much more significant economic impact. It is something that the Biden administration they were never willing to go there in terms of punishing Russia for what it's doing in Ukraine. Is Trump contemplating that? I think he might be. This same senator who was with us last night thinks that there's some tough news from Trump on China coming in the next few days. So I think this is, all of these issues kind of tie together, right? The chaos in the Middle East, the strike by Israel against Hamas in Qatar, the fact that Putin is pushing back against Trump's peace initiative with respect to Ukraine, and then the desire of President Trump to have a big deal with Xi Jinping at some point this fall. These things are all interrelated. It is very complicated. I can't put my finger on exactly what the grand strategy is of the president because he hasn't articulated that necessarily, but I think he's looking to maximize his leverage. He's trying to be as flexible as possible. So he'll say something like, here we go, without specifying what it is. But my guess is we're looking at economic sanctions more than we are military action on the battlefield.
Was this the step too far by Putin? Is this going to be the saving grace for Ukraine that actually brings the full force of the U.S. or some stronger measure of it to their aid?
I think it would be wrong to say this is the final step. It is a step. And I suspect it's good for Ukraine that Trump is seeing Putin for what he is. That doesn't mean he's going to.
Does he? Because people are criticizing him, saying, Putin walked all over him at the Alaska summit, and that was his day. And there you go. You fell for it, Mr. President.
Maybe so. He did fly a B-2 bomber over Putin's head, and Putin seemed amused by it. Trump said he was going to give him a couple of weeks to come up with, a better direction. That hasn't happened. So the onus is on
President Trump. Poland.
Yeah, if anything, it's gotten worse. So the onus is on President Trump to act. What's he going to do? This is like he's got the ball here, and he needs to make a move.
All talk and no walk. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. Finally, Les, we're out of time. Give me just as quickly as you can, what is Netanyahu doing? How long will the U.S. tolerate this? Or are they kind of secretly in cahoots and he's, acting as shocked as he can in public, our president?
I think the president is genuinely upset and was surprised by this. I don't think that means there's going to be a real breach between Trump and Netanyahu. At the end of the day, Netanyahu and a security cabinet have decided they're going for the military solution with Hamas, not the negotiation solution. And that's what we're seeing play out. It's tough news.
It is tough news, no question. Les Munson is head of the International Practice Group at BGR, a Washington's insider, the man to know, the man to see, and our great friend on the FarrCast. Thank you, Les, for being with us.
Thanks, Michael. Great to see you.
That's it for another FarrCast, ladies and gentlemen, as we cover Wall Street, Washington, and the world, bringing you experts and insiders every week, except for the past two when we didn't. But we'll try and do better here in season 9. That we better understand what's going on in the world around us as we're all barraged by headlines. We're trying to understand, go below the surface and get to the real meaning of some of these insider stories, like Les Munson, senator from last night's fundraiser. So we try to do that on the FarrCast and understand what's going on around the world. We thank you for listening and being with us now in season 9. For Harry Jennings, my producer, and everybody at Farr Miller in Washington, thanks for listening. Please share us on social media. I'm Michael Farr. I'll see you next week.
And that's a wrap for the FarrCast first episode of Season 9. Thanks to this week's guests, Jim Lebenthal, Dan Mahaffee, and Lester Munson. And thanks to you, our listeners, especially those of you who have been with us from Season 1, all the way through the pandemic and here to today. We are happy to bring you the show every week with insights into Wall Street, Washington, and the world, and hope that you'll share us with friends and colleagues. The FarrCast is produced by Michael Farr and Harry Jennings and comes to you weekly for free on all major podcast platforms, including Spotify, TuneIn, and Apple Podcasts. Please be aware that anytime we or any of our guests mention a specific company, sector, or refer to performance in relation to an earnings report, news headline, or economic trend, it is not a recommendation to buy or sell. Review the risks and rewards of any investment with your financial advisor for what specific investment and general strategy is appropriate for you before you make any investment decision. And if we can be of assistance here at Farr Miller in Washington, please reach out to me at hjennings@farrmiller.com. We are here to help, and I'll be happy to put you in touch with one of our investment professionals to help you navigate your financial course across the changing investing landscape. We are grateful for all of your notes and comments, and we try to respond to as many as we can. Please keep those emails and messages coming. We'll be back with you next week following the Federal Reserve meeting, and we'll have a slate of guests to explain what the developments mean not only for the markets, but for the political climate and what it means for the American citizen on the street. Until then, take care, stay safe, and stay healthy. And thank you for listening to the FarrCast, Wall Street, Washington, and the world. Farr Miller in Washington is a group comprised of investment professionals registered with Hightower Advisors, LLC, and a SEC-registered investment advisor. Some investment professionals may also be registered with Hightower Securities, LLC, member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors, LLC. Securities are offered through Hightower Securities, LLC. All information referenced herein is from sources believed to be reliable. Farr Miller in Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC have not independently verified the accuracy or completeness of the information contained in this podcast. Farr Miller in Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC and any of its affiliates make no representations or warranties, expressed or implied, as to the accuracy or completeness of the information or for statements or errors or omissions or results obtained from the use of this information. Farr Miller in Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC and any of its affiliates assume no liability for any action made or taken in reliance on or relating in any way to the information. This podcast and the materials contained herein were created for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed are solely those of the authors and do not represent those of Hightower Advisors, LLC or any of its affiliates. Farr Miller in Washington and Hightower Advisors, LLC or any of its affiliates do not provide tax or legal advice. This material was not intended or written to be used or presented in any way to any entity as tax or legal advice. Clients are urged to consult their tax and/or legal advisors for related questions.